New Marvel Snap patch means new Marvel Snap data mines. As always, all the information we're going over in this video is subject to change before it officially comes out, but we do now tentatively know the cards and characters we'll be releasing in February as well as March for my favorite superhero card game. Let's go ahead and dive on into the details and give you my thoughts on where these cards could fit into the metagame. To kick things off, we have our next season pass card for February releasing on the 6th, and that is the Black Swan, a 2/3 with the very potent on reveal effect until the end of next turn. All of your 1-cost cards cost 0. So obviously, anytime you're making a bunch of things cheap, or in the case of Black Swan here, completely free, the first thing that jumps to my mind is Hitmonkey. This could be a fantastically fun enabler for that card. Another thing that jumps to my mind that could actually be used in tandem with Hitmonkey or in other deck ideas on its own is something like Werewolf by Night. You get to play a bunch of cheap 1-energy cards that are then free from Black Swan to make your dog jump all around the board and scale him up to size. Another fun idea is you could use Black Swan to make things free, play out a bunch of 0-energy 1-drops, and then beast them all back to your hand on a turn, so they're 0 again on another turn, letting you kind of double up on the discount that she's potentially providing for you. Well, it's hard to know exactly how powerful and competitive this effect is going to be. I will say this is exactly the style of Marvel Snap card that I love playing, one where you have tons of different sequencing decisions in a single turn, and I would be cooking up all sorts of sweet stuff for this one to play out with. Our first Spotlight cache in February, also releasing on the 6th into Series 5, is the Supergiant, a 4/5 who has the on-reveal effect. All cards played next turn don't reveal until the game ends. 3 immediate use cases for Supergiant jump to mind for me. 2 of them are ones that you can build around personally. The first being Taskmaster on turn 5, curves really eloquently after Supergiant on turn 4. So you play that Taskmaster out, and then on turn 6, you play something absolutely massive like a blob or something else, and then your Taskmaster flips up at the end of the game and copies that, giving you 2 large stat sticks. Another thing you could do with Supergiant is kind of preempt your interactive cards on the board, knowing that they're not going to flip up until the game ends. So you could play Supergiant on 4, and then you could tee up things like Shang-Chi or Shadow King, for example, in pass that you know you're going to need them in, and they'll flip up after your opponent's big plays happen in those locations on turn 6. The last thing that comes to mind with Supergiant is acting as a disruptive card for cards that really want to do key things on that 5th turn of the game. One such strategy, for example, are the various Sarah control decks that really want to play their namesake on turn 5 to have that ongoing effect on turn 6. And if you Supergiant on 4, that Sarah won't flip up for your opponent until after the game ends. Supergiant could also disrupt cards like the Black Swan that we just saw that likely wants to be played on that 5th turn to set up big turn 6s for your opponent. Our next release coming on February the 13th directly to Series 4 is Cull Obsidian, a 4/9 with the effect can only be played where you have a 1-cost card in play. Very obvious first inclusion is you could play this as a reasonable sized stat card inside of a Thanos deck, thanks to all those Infinity Stones being 1-energy cards you can play out all over the board. 4/9's a pretty premium stat line. Usually this type of effect on something like Jessica Jones or Rescue requires you to telegraph where it's going to be. So the big upside Cull has over other cards with similar stat lines is you can wait until that final turn of the game to play it out, so your opponent doesn't know where your stat stick is going to end up at. Our next card, tentative releasing on February 20th into Series 5, is Corvus Glaive, a 3/4 with the on-reveal effect of discard 2 cards from your hand to get +1 max energy. Discard decks have definitely struggled a little bit in the blob metagame, as well as after that Chavez rework took away one of their pieces of top end, and this seems like a really powerful effect that could put them back on the map. Typically, something like Electro has a massive drawback of only letting you play 1 card per turn, and Corvus Glaive's drawback here could potentially be an upside with the right deck building considerations. I think this card has a lot of potential to be very strong. Acceleration in Marvel Snap is not something to ever be underestimated. Our final February release tentatively coming on the 27th directly to Series 5 is Proxima Midnight, a 4/6 that says when this is discarded, jumps to your lowest power location. The obvious and direct comparison everyone's going to want to make for Proxima is to existing card Wolverine, a 2/2 that when it's discarded, it jumps to a location randomly and gets +2 points of power. At face value in a deck that's only discarding cards and not destroying things, Proxima is going to provide 2 more points of stats than Wolverine when she gets binned. But I think the more important part when comparing these two cards is the fact that Proxima gives you deterministic knowledge of where she's going to end up when she's binned. As someone who's played a lot of Wolverine, I can't tell you the number of times you're like, I need Wolverine to go here or here, but definitely not there to win this game, and you're just leaving things up to variance, and Proxima is going to make it so if you're playing cards like Blade or Lady Sif or Colleen Wing that are discarding her deterministically, you know exactly where she's going to play out on the board. Proxima also has obvious synergy with Corvus, the card we looked at before this one, because we're going to need a critical mass of cards in Corvus decks to get value when we bin them from our hand, since Corvus is going to be discarding 2 cards on the 3rd turn of the game. Looking along to the March season, we have our tentative season pass card for that month. Hope Summers, a 3 energy, 3 power card with the effect after you play a card here, get +2 energy next turn. Now, I did my normal asterisk Datamined subject to change at the start of this video, but I think Hope Summers warrants reiterating that because she has the most nuts effect at face value of any of the cards we're going to review today. At just surface level, let's say you play Hope out to an empty location and you play 3 more cards out after her on turns 4 and 5. That's going to give you 6 extra energy in those final turns of the game. That's massive, and that's even before you get into the considerations of cards like Nightcrawler or Jeff or Vision that move out of her location, or something like Kitty Pryde that you can play out into her spot on turns 4 and 5. Gosh, I feel like I'd be surprised if this releases at +2 and not +1. I think even at +1, this card seems absolutely absurd. Just pump up tons of extra energy going into those big end moments of the game. I hope to know what you think of this one because it seems absolutely insane. Our next card release in March, also tentatively releasing on the 5th into Series 5, is Pixie, a 1/3 with the on-reveal effect, shuffle the costs of all cards in your deck. Pixie seems like she has some incredible high roll potential. Shuffle the costs, I assume it means it puts all the costs randomly between all the other cards in your deck. So for example, if you have a Wasp and a Hulk, they could potentially switch costs with each other in your deck. So you have a 6 energy Wasp and a 0 energy Hulk. And immediate synergy that jumps out in my mind looking at Pixie is that Mobius and Mobius is likely an auto-include in any Pixie deck, because if you have Mobius in play, your cards that Pixie made cheaper will be cheaper, but any cards she tried to make more expensive are going to be capped at their base cost, thanks to Mobius making it so your card's cost can't be increased. I will say it's interesting to note that Pixie has what's considered a premium stat line, i.e. 3 points of power for a 1 energy card, which in general means Second Dinner looks at her on-reveal effect as potentially being a drawback. This card I could see honestly going either way. The absolute massive blowout, high roll potential, and big cube equity she could generate, I think could easily make her competitive. But I think regardless of how good or bad she ends up being, this is probably going to be a design that a lot of people despise. Our next March release, tentatively releasing on the 12th into Series 5, is the Mockingbird, a 5 energy, 9 power card that costs 1 less for each card you have in play that didn't start in your deck. At a glance, I really like the look of Mockingbird's design. There are some cards that have obviously strong deck building synergy with her. The three that jump to mind for me are Squirrel Girl, Mysterio, and Shauna. All put 2 or even 3 cards into play that didn't start in your deck, reducing her cost by multiple points. I think it's also worth pointing out, though, that you don't need to have that many cards in play to really get good value out of Mockingbird. A 4/9 is considered on or even a little bit above rate, and a 3/9 is absolutely something to write home about. So even in decks that only consistently get a couple of things into play to reduce her cost, she's still going to be an incredibly efficient threat to help you close out your games. Up next, tentatively releasing on March 19th to Series 5 is the Cannonball, a 5/8 with the on-reveal effect. Move an enemy card away from here and add a rock where it was. If it can't move, destroy it to add the rock. At a glance, I kind of have low expectations for this effect. We have recently downgraded to Series 3 card Stegron, who's a 4/6 that moves an enemy card at his location, who really hasn't ever been a format powerhouse or metagame staple. Cannonball's a little bit bigger stat line and does at least have the added utility of blowing a thing up if it can't be moved, and there is the clutter aspect as well, but I'm not sure if those 2 extra asterisks onto this effect necessarily make up for the fact that it's more expensive than Stegron is, a card that's already struggled to see play. Our final card in the Datamined for March, tentatively releasing on the 26th into Series 5, is the War Machine, a 4/6 with the on-reveal effect. Until the end of next turn, nothing can stop you from playing cards anywhere. This one honestly just seems like an incredibly powerful tech card. There have definitely been a number of metagames in Marvel Snap history where I would have been slamming this into almost every single deck I was playing. Being able to get extra cards into the Flooding or a Professor X path, or even things like Sanctum Sanctorum that you normally wouldn't be able to play into that flip up on the board naturally. War Machine is going to provide you with a lot of flexibility in some of the most key moments of the game, especially if you're deploying it on turn 5. The fact that his effect is asymmetrical, allowing only you to get into those hard to reach places and not your opponent, seems absolutely massive. All in all, it seems we tentatively have a fantastically wide range of sweet and powerful cards releasing over the next couple of months. If I had to pick out a card that reads as the most powerful to me from these data mines, it would definitely be Hope Summers and all the potential energy acceleration she could provide. If I had to pick out a card that I personally am most looking forward to getting my hands on, it's definitely the Black Swan, though, because I love playing out lots of cards in those final turns of the game, and Black Swan is likely going to be one of the best ways to do that once she releases. As always, I would love to know which cards you are most looking forward to playing to in these next couple of months. And if you enjoyed my musing and breakdowns on this topic, don't forget to snap that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any other upcoming Marvel Snap content that we're putting out many days a week.